is the magic of the internet. We are connected with different jet lags. So I would like to welcome all of you to be here with us in this webinar that was organized by me, myself, and Metin Kozak. Thanks for being my friend all the time, even when I'm not very happy. Is able to support me every time.
Thank you.
The aim of this webinar is to share the perceptions and the experience that we have in different settings. Okay, we are dealing with a very, very different situation, and we would like to learn from different countries, from different continents, what is going to happen and how do you feel about this and what do you expect to have. We have with us Dimitrios, the best scholars in the world. It's our pleasure to introduce Dimitrios Boalis. Everyone knows him. So
he's out, I think.
Of University, from Polytechnic Institute of Hong Kong, Andres Artal from Spain, and Alan from America, a very good friend as well. So welcome here. We will start with some questions. I sent to you all the questions, but now is the turn of Metin to talk a little bit and ask you to put some on the table to talk about. In this case, on the PC desk.
Okay, thank you very much, Antonia. Welcome everybody to this online, let's say, webinar or meeting room. I hope the problem will be sorted out very soon and we can get more people as the audience. So I don't want to spend too much time, just we can start from the current situation now. What happens in your country because of this pandemics, you know, COVID-19? So what is the current situation? So just briefly talk about, you know, what happens in, let's say, about 2 minutes. We can start from Hayam, perhaps. He's the first one on my screen now.
All right, okay. Thank you for inviting me to the meeting and to share some views from Hong Kong and from China. My background is economics, and I also have been involved in forecasting. This year, it is very difficult for us to forecast what is going to happen in the future in terms of tourism in Hong Kong and in China, because the coronavirus, and in Hong Kong particularly, there was another social unrest which affected tourism in Hong Kong a great deal. So we are facing a very difficult task. But in terms of coronavirus situation in Hong Kong, I think we are stable. I think over the last couple of days, we have 0 confirmed cases, and the total cases around 1,025, I believe. So I think the situation is getting better. And most of the flight from abroad has been suspended, but still there are few flights from Europe, from China, a few other places, but it's very strictly quarantined. When you arrived in Hong Kong, everyone will be checked, you have to have a test, and until the result has come out, you will not be allowed to leave the airport and also the quarantine hotels in the region, in the area. And even after you test negative, you still have to be quarantined for 14 days before you are allowed out. So this is very tightly controlled. And of course, social distancing, and all schools are suspended. So all classes are taught online. from primary school to the universities. And although most of the restaurants are still open, but they also have very strict control in terms of the group, how many people you can enter as a group to the restaurant. And so actually any group more than 4 is not allowed. So it's a very tightly controlled. So the situation in Hong Kong is stable. Probably in China, everybody you know is gradually started to open up the economy, and even Wuhan is already opened, and people can travel into and out of Wuhan relatively easily within China. But internationally, the restrictions are still there. But overall, the Chinese economy started to open up and gradually return to new normal. Actually, it will not be able to return to normal in the next 1 or 2 years until the vaccine is found. Let me show you a couple of slides in terms of our forecast for tourism in Hong Kong first. So Hong Kong has been hit very hard, as you know, as I already explained. Actually, we had a double blow. Last year, second half of last year, we had social unrest. And then from the beginning of this year, we have this coronavirus. So as you can see, we have done some forecast before the coronavirus occurred. So you can see the blue line on the top is the tourism arrivals to Hong Kong from a different part of the world, total tourism arrivals. And you can see actually there's already decline in 2020, and that is because of the social unrest. But then when the coronavirus started to affect Hong Kong, and you can see we predicted in 2020, the pessimistic view is that 80% decline in arrivals into Hong Kong. Most likely scenario is 66% decline, and optimistic is 36% decline. So as from our expectation, because the situation is still going on, the Hong Kong will probably lost about 60 to 70% of tourist arrivals in 2020, and then gradually recover in 2021. Actually, the pessimistic scenario, it will not return to the normal trend until 2023. So it's take a long time to recover. Of course, this forecast take into consideration of different things, including the travel restrictions and also the government policies in terms of control of tourists. So these are the three scenarios in terms of Hong Kong. China is more or less the same. You can see there will be a more than 60% decline in 2020, and then gradually retain 2023 according to the pessimistic scenario. So it's going to be difficult for both for Hong Kong and China. But I guess later on we can discuss what the policies the government should adopt in order to recover a little bit quicker. And that's my presentation initially. I hope
thank you very much.
this is useful.
It's very, very useful information about the situation in Hong Kong, as well as what happens with the tourism industry in China and Hong Kong. So who is next? Yes, Andreas.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much for invitation. It's a pleasure to be with you here. And it's very interesting, this webinar, no? In order to share what's happening in different places of the world, China, Hong Kong, where everything started. Yeah, I'm going to give a brief summary on the Spanish situation. As you know, Spain has been one of the most hit countries. I'm not very sure on numbers, but of course on the media, no, on the media, infodemia and these kind of issues have been very hit in the country. A new government, this kind of situation. What are the forecasts for Spain in terms of the economy? Not going to tourism now, but in terms of the economy, I just read some forecasts from today, Bank of Spain, BBVA research, economic research office, and so on. They are talking about 5 to 10% of decrease in GDP for this year.
Okay.
An average of around 7-8%. But what is interesting is that they predict some rebound for the 21. The GDP to grow around 6%. I'm not very confident on that, but they are very serious forecasts. So let's see what's happened, no? When they open up. The current situation now in Spain is that we have been for 5 weeks confined. This week is making the 5th one, starting around 13, 14 of March. We expect to be here more or less another month. They are starting this week. They open up situation mobility for some industries, construction and some key industries. But for example, for the tourism, leisure, and culture, they are talking about that we are not going to be able to recover normality until the end of the year. So it's going to be difficult. Because think about just between the Easter holiday time, just we have been through, and month of September, Spain receives more or less 60 million international visitors. So those forecasts of high on 60%, I'm not very sure what's going to happen, no? But I think we can be this year. This could be. For sure, no, we will speak about, but it's going to be a domestic tourism flow, no? And I don't think people is going to travel so much inside the country, no? So perhaps some kind of nearby situation, no? Let's see what happens. In terms of, I think for us the key point will be how Europe is behaving, no? How the European Union is setting up any aid, any funding. In fact, they have been talking about 1 billion euros, half for the health and sanitary sector, direct aid in order to have enough facilities to attend people, in order to restore that kind of confidence in safety and security issues. But for example, in unemployment, we have some numbers that are saying that perhaps we are coming back to the financial crisis period. No, there's some people talking about 20% of unemployment. No? Let's see what happens. But I think the key will be how Europe is helping most hit countries. No, Italy, Spain, other countries in the Euro area. Okay.
Okay. Any more?
No, I think it's enough for this first site of the country. We can continue speaking later on this.
Okay, so thank you, Andreas. Antonio is just sitting in the middle, but I will just pass on to Alan. Good morning, Alan. Yes, please.
Okay, it's a very good morning. I've got a very strong coffee with me, so all is good. Okay, I think it's probably fair to say it's a very, very similar story to everybody else that we've heard so far. I'll just throw some numbers that were quite startling. These came out at the end of last week. So the anticipated occupancy level, hotel occupancy for the United States for this year will be 38%. So in 2001, the year of 9/11, which obviously was a huge disruptor, it was 59%. And even through the economic crisis of 2007, 2008, it was 54%. So clearly, the word unprecedented is used frequently, but this really is ground zero in terms of tourism. Here in Orlando, the occupancy is down to about 14%, which is its lowest ever. And probably the most startling, air travel is down 95%. So if you're like me and you live on a flight path, it's very, very, very quiet. But the anticipated drop in GDP this year for the United States, it's single biggest drop since 1946. So just, that's the magnitude. As ever with the United States, there's the United States that you watch on the television news, and then there's the reality. And certainly from what we're seeing industry-wise, everybody's doing what they should be doing. Everybody's still in lockdown. Well, most people are in lockdown. Industry are obviously pretty distraught, but are very collaborative in the approaches that they're pulling together. Florida itself, bearing in mind Florida has a population of 20 million, the actual number of deaths is significantly lower than anticipated. There's been 764 deaths as of yesterday, which, as I say, for a 20 million population is pretty good. And I think that's primarily because the major areas, the major cities and the major counties, they went into lockdown much earlier than the state, and certainly what goes on up in the White House. So generally people are following the rules. Moving forward, I think there's a number of things that we'll talk about, but I guess it's fair just to conclude that about 5 weeks ago, unemployment here was about 2.5%. It was nothing. Needless to say, that has changed dramatically. Disney, as of the 19th, so what's that, 2 days ago, so Disney have now furloughed virtually their entire staff here and in California, so that's about 100,000 people. And Disney is shut indefinitely in Florida, and Universal Studios is shut up to the May the 31st, pending reviews. So yeah, pretty dramatic times. The health consequences not as bad as I think as people anticipated, but damage to the industry. I go with Hyan. It will be interesting to see what the new normal is in a month or two's time.
Okay, thank you, Alan. Dimitrios?
I'll talk about two places. I'll talk about the UK and I'll talk about Greece.
Yes.
I think in the UK, Boris Johnson took a huge gamble and for a long, long period was keeping the country going and the economy going. And until a study from Imperial College came forward and estimated that we'll have 250,000 people dead in the UK alone, between 250 and 500,000. So at that moment, they changed their strategy and they asked people to go to lockdown. And since then, things have become a little bit under control, not totally under control. I can see the latest numbers that the UK has got 125,000 people affected, confirmed. And I can see 16,500 dead. Now, this does not include people who die at home or people who die in nursing homes. So there are good estimates that these are between 6,000 and 10,000 people more that have died. It's phenomenally bad. The whole country is on standstill. Most of the tourism places and most of the hotels are really, really down like everywhere else. And we are holding our breath. In contrast, for probably one of the very few times that I'm a proud Greek, where the Greek government actually started very, very quickly, because there's a professor in London called Elias Mosialos, who's both a medical doctor and an economist, in LSE, and he started lobbying people, and he came to the public domain and said, look, this will be really, really bad. And then there are two guys. There's a professor of immunology called Professor Chiodras, who is absolutely incredible in Greece. And they have been doing the absolutely best things. And then there's a guy who's Undersecretary of State for for State Security called Hardalias. And these guys effectively have been leading the country into a very safe kind of situation. We've got about in Greece, we've got 2,500 people who are affected, and you've got 112 people who have died from coronavirus, primarily people that have older and people who had previous conditions. The big issue, I've spent about, first of all, I spent January, February, and half of March in Greece because of my mother's situation. And I was very close to what was happening. And a lot of people are now really afraid of the economic catastrophe that is coming and the humanitarian catastrophe that's coming as a result. I've been spending a lot of time on various seminars and talking to friends who are operating hotels and tourist business in various places, and especially on the islands, which, if we understand well, and Andre may be able to confirm that, I think summer 2020 is cancelled. And we just saw some data from Spain that says you're not going to have tourism organizations and hospitality organizations are not going to be able to attract international tourists in the summer 2020. If that is right, and that is the case in Greece, and we just had a tour operator who canceled the whole program just now, it means that people were not going to have an income, especially on the islands and the seaside place, for about 18 months. That is hugely difficult. And if you're in a big country like in the US, in the UK, perhaps in Turkey, in Spain, you'll have quite a lot of domestic tourism. But when you're in Greece and you've got a lot of islands and you've got transportation issues where you don't necessarily have the level of health infrastructures to be able to support a very big demand in the summertime, it'll be much more complicated. So the UK is facing a major economic crisis. That's on top of Brexit and a lot of other situations that's happening. I think once Boris Johnson comes out of his illness, he'll have to explain a few things to people, and I think we'll have a major impact, economic impact, and also there are some statistics that they say the UK is going to have about 60 to 65,000 people dying. We'll see. I hope that's not true, but that's some of the latest statistics I've seen. Greece will be hopefully in a much better position as far as the health situation is, but the economic situation is really, really difficult.
Okay, thank you, Dimitrios. Yes, Antonia, do you want to say something about Portugal? We cannot hear you.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Okay.
The situation in Portugal is more or less controlled. We have 20,000 people infected. We have 700 dead. So, of course, we are only 10 million people, so inhabitants. So we are a very small country, but the growth rate of infections are around 3% daily. So is more or less stable and controlled. We are closed. Everyone is at home. Most of the things are closed, so we are not able to work anymore. The air flights are completely locked down, so we are not able to. Only the flights that we only have now is to turn back some people that we have in other countries or in between the islands, because we also have two islands, Madeira and Azores, and we have to manage the movement of people from one place to another. it's amazing because 70% of our hotels are completely locked. Restaurants and tour operators are also locked. We know that more than 80% of the companies are applying for layoff. So that means that the unemployment is increasing a lot. We also, the big chains like Pestana and Villa Galé, they also announced now that they will close. They will not open this summer, so they will be closed all the summer. So, and also TAP Airlines now is asking for nationalization. You know that some time ago, TAP asked for privatization. Now they are asking for nationalization because they are not able to support to have all the airlines locked and closed. So the Portugal Bank, the central bank, forecast first a decrease in economy of 3%. Now they are pointing out for 80%. The big issue and something that I would like to emphasize in this discussion is that even if all the companies and hotels are closed, nowadays they are still working, and they are working in a solidary way. Lodging old people, lodging the doctors and also the nurses and all the staff that are not able to go anymore at home. They lodge them, they offer a lot of meals, and it's amazing to see how an industry that is close to be in bankruptcy, they are still helping everyone. So, and this is the true sense of tourism. I think that at the end of this crisis, we need to understand what we want from tourism. And tourism is hospitality. Okay? And I saw that all over the world, this kind of initiatives are taken and people are helping the others. So I think that population will be more prepared for be more hospital than we used to be. Don't you think?
Yeah.
Could be, why not?
So now
more hospital in the future.
Yes.
Thank you, Antonio. Well, let me give some information about Turkey. Well, so we have very limited time. So, the life in Turkey is more flexible now. We don't have any permanent lockdown, but it's a partial. Beginning from tomorrow night, we are not allowed to go out until Monday morning. The schools, primary high schools, are suspended until the end of this month. But all the universities, teaching at all universities are suspended until the end of the semester. So we have no teaching anymore in the school. I just only one of the persons. We have only a couple of people coming to the school every day in my school. So we will have just the exams, final exams in August. All the resort hotels on the beach area, they are closed. There are some, hotels in cities, which are open, but their, occupancy rate per day is much lower. And the hotels are usually operating for the health service, staff. So not for the, usual customers. So we are doing now online teaching, and regarding the current situation of tourism industry for this year, I think there are different groups of people in Turkey from the industry. Some people say they are very optimistic about this summer, about this year, so they want to open the hotels beginning from June or July. And some others, they are more pessimistic, saying that I think they will lose this 2020 until the end of the year. So they are looking for solutions for the next year. Well, I want to ask two more questions. So the second question can be about, can you, well, we all talk about the problem now, okay, as a result of this virus. So can you present any kind of original recommendation that we can use for the recovery in the industry for this year or for the next year? So shall we start from Dimitrios? Cannot hear you. Okay.
Yes, I think, first of all, let me say that the license is probably better because I can see 105 participants. So more people can actually join. I think what I've been describing to people.
Sorry, Dimitrios. Now we could have everyone that was registered.
Okay, good. So what I've been saying to people is that we need to look at this thing as three stages. I think we are at the emergency stage right now, where we're still losing human life. I think then we're going to go to the immediate recovery the day after, and then we're going to go to longer term kind of recovery. I think the lesson we've learned is that kind of solidarity, that what tourism can do for community rather than what community can do for tourism. And I think this is critical, because what we've been seeing is that people using their kitchens, their safes, their rooms to actually support the government, the local health structures to deal with coronavirus. And we create on Facebook a page called 360 Tourism Solidarity to actually showcase all of those things. And I really want to invite everybody to showcase all the good people who are doing great things out there. Because this is the community that's going to take us forward. I think longer term, I just finished a webinar for the WTO talking about real-time strategies and smart tourism strategies. And it's really about finding the right information in real time, making the right decisions and move forward. I think a lot of people have realized that nobody is going to be unaffected by this crisis. And I gave the example of Captain Sully, who managed to land, or in fact water the plane on Hatcho River. He had 210 seconds to actually take a plane with no engines to safety. And I think this is what we'll need to do. Everybody needs, from their position and in their situation, to actually minimize loss for the time being and develop the opportunity to create value in the short term, immediate term, and then in the longer term to start restructuring.
Okay.
Can I just add a couple of things there, Metin?
Yes, yes, you are in a hurry, I know. So you have a meeting at 9 o'clock.
Yeah, no, I'm just in a state of shock because I'm agreeing with Dimitrios. That doesn't happen very often. Okay. But I think that just two or three things, just to add to what he said. I think certainly what's very evident here, and I'm sure it will be evident in other markets as well, we all know the story. Everybody takes tourism for granted until it's not there anymore. And the minute it stops, everybody's like, wow, I never realized the scale, the reach, and the overall impact of tourism, events, and the whole thing. So certainly here, and I'm sure it's the same elsewhere, there is a new, okay, when tourism does come back, because it will, I think people will be more appreciative. I think residents in particular will be more receptive to visitors because they realize the scale of the loss. So just as an example, in the state of Florida, 78% of all our taxes are tourism or sales related. So you don't have to be high-hand to work out the budget shortfall next year. So, you know, it really is significant. I think the other thing is the humanity. Dimitrios mentions the 360. You know, what is so impressive here is how many of the major tourism providers, the theme parks, etc., they are essentially feeding people now, and they have been really from day one. So the food banks and, you know, a lot of the poor areas, they weren't asked to do it, they just did it. And I see it this little bit like Antonia's story with the hotels. There really has been a very strong human side to this at a time where their economic losses are devastating. So I think, you know, there's a huge positive for hospitality and tourism when we do get out of this. And I guess my final point, and oh dear, Demetrius, I have to agree, it pains me, but no, the technology will be used more and more. And I think it's already, people are now using the smart technology to find COVID-free parts of the beach and COVID-free parts of countries' resorts. So I think this will just accelerate the trend that was already happening anyway. So it will just take it to another level. So I agree with you, young man.
Okay. Alan, yes.
Thank you.
I am.
All right. Okay. So I agree with Demetrius and Alan in terms of you know, the recovery strategies. From an economist's perspective, I think tourism is only going to return when the demand is there, right? So the demand now actually suppressed almost completely, especially international travel. So there's no demand at all. So I think from the government policy perspective, there's a lot of things need to be done to help the tourism businesses, especially small, medium-sized businesses, because there's no tourists, there's no visitors, they cannot survive. I think in the short run, it will have to rely on the government incentive or stimulus policies, money, subsidies to the businesses, and also maybe you know, even cash handout to residents to encourage them to consume locally, so that the local smaller, medium-sized businesses still can open, although they will not be able to make money. But this actually is totally the government's job. So they need to actually to help those smaller, medium-sized businesses. And you may ask how. Actually, in many countries, especially in the United States, Alan, the government has spent probably already a lot of money, and also the government is in debt. But they can actually issue government bond, right? And also the you know, they have other type of stimulate packages that can keep the smaller business still opening. But for China, actually, it is a different story, because the China still have a huge reserve, and the government can start the building of the infrastructures, and they can stimulate through the government investment and keep the you know, the companies, especially the big companies, running, and then they employ people, and then stimulate the local economy, and then this actually will help not only the whole economy but also tourism. So I think the government should play a major role in terms of helping the tourism businesses. Actually, what happened in Hong Kong is that actually the government actually give every resident 10,000 Hong Kong dollars for the year, just to encourage them to go out to consume, so to keep the restaurants and the small tourist attractions open, and also the help the businesses in terms of subsidize, even waiver of the rent, and so on and so forth, so that you know, they can continue before the tourist returns, because that would take a year or so before the tourism returned to normal. I think now is really the government should use finance or fiscal or other policies to subsidize the businesses to keep them going until the tourism demand returns.
Okay, thank you, Haiyan. Yes, Andreas?
Okay, yeah, I share all your views and strategies. Yeah, in Spain, tourism sector is more or less direct plus indirect and so on, around 10, 13% of the GDP. So, but for example, in the Balearic Island is more or less 80%. So I think that the strategies will be a bit different depending on the how you need it, no? How important it's for you. This consciousness of tourism and all the assets and experiences that is bringing, of course, is coming back to our minds. In fact, we are running some questionnaire on that, no? Asking resident population, how do you miss tourism? How do you miss the tourist? Or even for the tourists, no? Of course, the very, very, very short term is domestic tourism. We are working on some tourist intelligence tools in order to spread information, no? Using new technologies, smart strategies on guaranteeing safety and security, no? Health issues for giving certainty to people, no? To be able to come back to destinations, no? Because it's the very short term strategies. In the meantime, we all are going to, I think we have and we all are going to learn on COVID, no? Is more than tourism, is human experience, no? What we have been going through, no? How about international students, no? For the next year, or all these issues. Yeah, strategy is going to depend. In our case, we don't have many room in order to spend. People is talking about spending around 10% of GDP. But we all have in mind that frozen of the civil servant wages for 10 years. In fact, it was the first year that we started to recover some purchasing power, no? So we don't want the government to spend a lot again in order to be in another decade of deficit and cuts, no? So it's the time for Europe, I'm telling again, for the bonds that Haiyan is referring to, why not? The European Parliament is discussing about coronavirus bonds. For the most hit countries, why not getting deeper in the building of Europe? No, I think is the solution. In fact, this middle term is going to focus more on regionalization of tourism. We have a real regionalization of the economy. So in fact, we have regionalization of tourism, no? Europeans traveling around Europe, Asians traveling around Asia, and so on, no? So this kind of strategies of opening up not only your country, not only the destination, but your region, and yeah, all kind of security messages and information through the IT tools in order to get certainty, because people after confinement would like to go out, no? To go out to meet people, Mediterranean people wanting to meet each other, no? Why not the family and so on. With the necessary security and health norms and issues, is the confinement coming back in fall? Who knows? So all tools giving certainty and transferring information to people will be very, very important, will be key for now. Destinations are working on that now. In Spain, the role of cities, agglomerations, museums, what is going to happen with all of that, no? Yeah, and why not rethinking, no? Talking about the environment, everybody quiet, the silence, the nature, the environment. We really have to put in tourism again, no? I think is very important. We have many challenges, and this has been a good time in order to reflect on those issues. No, so I think more or less this is my view.
Okay, thank you, Andres. Antonia?
We cannot hear you.
Antonia, are you there?
What was the question this time?
The question is, yes, what is the original, recommendation for the, recovery in the industry?
Okay, so in Portugal, we wish to have, but we don't have loans from the government. So it's impossible to have much more than, we need the help of Europe, and Europe is not very prone to help us because of the north of Europe. You know that, don't you, Andres? So I think as an economist, we do not need more loans. What we need is to put more money circulating. And for that, we need the approval of the European Union, and they are not very prone of that. So I don't think that this is not the right side to go. So we need, this summer, I think that in Portugal, we could expect some domestic tourists and some tourists from Spain that could come to Portugal by car, okay? I think that this is the right time to spread the word about Airbnb and HomeAway, because people will not feel very comfortable at your hotels. They will feel very comfortable in a private home. If the private home is able to show to the tourists that everything is very clean and they will be safe there. So Airbnb has a very nice opportunity on that. Furthermore, I think that for next year we could have something better, but we spread a lot of words about the respect for the earth. I was checking all the websites of national tourism associations around the world, and I found very interesting messages around 5 different disclaimers. The first one is quietness. That means tourism now is to be empty, is to be private. So quietness is one of the things that we need to spread around. If we want to share more things and to sell tourism, inspiring, open something that is a very different way to travel, but could be a business in a very short time. That is the virtual experiences. You are able to enter in a concert, to attend classes, to see a mountain, or even to experience some different things by virtual experience. So I think that now they are offering in a very short time, some of the tourism boards will selling this for sure. Then another thing is ethics of care. The human side of tourism, okay? All the websites of national tourism associations are showing a lot of messages that they care about the others, okay? And we need to take care of the others. And furthermore, there are another message that I think that is what we need to develop the most, because it's where we are a little bit late. That is respect for the earth. Okay? Most of the messages are about we are only hosts in the earth, and a host never forget who treats him very kindly. So we need to protect the environment. Okay. So next, the future of tourism pass through to take out mass tourism. Don't talk about over tourism.
Okay, we will talk about this one later.
But yes, try to not be too much greedy and to not take all the profit for you. Sharing economies and things like that is the key words to develop tourism. Okay.
Okay, so, well, I think we mostly talk about how we can use the public funds. Antonio mentioned about domestic tourism. We can also talk about, well, as a suggestion, how the industry can create resources and funds from itself, but it seems not possible because they have no money left. I also an idea, which is more, from the public side. What about, visa regulations? So can we tighten this, visa regulations only for this year and then to support more international visitors between the countries? Do you think it can be a reasonable, suggestion just to encourage,
I think, Metin, I think there are 2 or 3 issues here.
England is very difficult to get the visa.
Yeah, but I think there are 2 or 3 issues here, and I think it's very easy to actually confuse everything together. I think we really need to concentrate on this crisis situation and to look into 2 or 3 things. One is liquidity of businesses. And of course, if you're in Hong Kong or if you're in China, as Hagen was saying as well, you've got a government that's quite rich, it will be possible that the measures that they're taking are quite generous to sustain the industry and sustain people. If you're in places like Portugal, Greece, it will be a little bit more complicated. And I think there'll be a lot of pressures on governments. I think Alan will correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the US $25 billion went to save the airlines for 9 months.
Yep.
And this is the kind of money that's required. Now the other thing is this money that's coming in the short term. There is a question mark whether what's the contribution of the taxpayer to save the business, and actually how is the taxpayer assuming business risk, and what would the taxpayer require back as a return for this investment or for bailing people out. So there are a lot of issues that we have got to look at in the immediate term. And I think once we have sorted out the health crisis and we make sure that we are not losing people every day, I think that those will be the first issues. The next thing is, it's how do we prepare the industry to go again, and whether it's visas like what you mentioned, Metin, or whether there'll be an app that, like the Chinese friends are using, with the green, orange, red kind of QR code, which is based on where you have been, who you have been with. It's a very complicated kind of process to allow people to use. Then yesterday, Emirates start testing people before they fly. But I don't think that a lot of people have got an appetite to actually be tested just before they fly and then be returned back. And what's going to happen if someone gets, first of all, the tests are not reliable yet, but what happens if someone gets on a plane and affects several other people? Who will be responsible for that? And what will be the impact? So I think we really need to start looking into 2 or 3 things. We really need to look into the emergent situation and what's happening now during the crisis. I think the stage where we're going to go to the next stage is when we're going to have enough medicine to actually cure the disease.
Okay.
And the next stage is when we'll have the vaccine to prevent the virus spreading. I think in my mind, and speaking to immunologists and people in this business. I think those are the three stages. The first stage is really the crisis where we can do nothing. Then we've got the medicine. We're going to be able to restart and reignite the industry. And then once we have got the vaccine, then we will be able to go to the longer kind of term.
Metin, can I just throw in a comment, because I need to leave for another meeting now, but can I just follow up what Dimitrios said? And it's the issue of liquidity, and I agree with him 100% here. And I'm laughing at myself here. The American leadership gets a lot of criticism, which in many cases is justified. But I think this is one of the rare occasions where having a hotelier as a president, he actually understood the scale of the problem. And although the United States has the resources to throw at the problem, those resources were made available reasonably quickly. And I think, nobody knows, but I think, give it a year, 18 months down the line, those actions will probably have saved a lot of the industry in the United States. It's a huge sum of money, but as Dimitrios said, it's the magnitude. I think they recognize the magnitude of the liquidity problem quickly, and they've acted upon it. Okay, they can, but it's still a lot of money. But they understood the core problem, I think, and I hope for all of us moving forward.
Okay, thank you.
Alan, ultimately, it's the question of how many people are you prepared to lose?
Yes.
Because actually, I've been following that for a while, and it's not a matter of medical science here. I think it's a matter of statistics primarily.
Yeah.
And because I don't know where it stopped, but I think it is how many people are getting it. A percentage of those people are going to suffer. I think they're saying 5% will suffer really, really bad. And they'll need hospitalization. And out of those that they'll need to be, what they call it, tubed or whatever, to go into artificial, what they call it, ventilation. Yeah. Half of them they make it, and half of them they die. And I think ultimately it's a matter of statistics, and ultimately it's a matter of the society. What is the society? What is the number of people that the society is prepared
what's the threshold?
To kill effectively, because you're effectively killing people, not protecting them.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Alan.
Very nice to see you, everybody. Stay healthy.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you for...
Thank you, bye.
Thank you, Alan.
Okay, keep well.
From the audience, one says, well, I can't see the name, it says Corona certification for hotels or hospitality-related services can make sense to you. So I think this is what the industry is working now. Government body is also working about, Corona certification in terms of maintaining hygiene and sanitation up to the standards. So do you have any other examples in your countries?
I think Hong Kong has got the best manual I've seen about sanitation of hotels. It's about 83 pages, and it's a very comprehensive one.
Yeah.
And it's not a matter of certificate. I think it's a matter of understanding what the procedure.
That's right, the procedures and process. I think Hong Kong has been. I don't think this is a certification, but also all hotels need to follow the procedures to make sure that there's no infection, there's no possible coronavirus infection. I think the industry should have a standard operations procedures in the future, especially this probably in the future, this kind of pandemic will continue to occur. So the industry should have this kind of standard.
So, it can be used as a basic, kind of, guidelines or tips for the
operation standard, part of the operation standard.
Okay, good. So
I think the other thing that goes with that is the cost of this, because normally what you have is you've got one housekeeper per 15 rooms. If we do the normal cleaning, which the normal cleaning is about 15 minutes to 20 minutes. If it's a checkout, it's half an hour. If you understand operations of hospitality, then you really need to realize that the level of cleaning that is required, disinfection every time that someone is leaving, will be much more thorough. So you probably need to have double the housekeeping staff that you had in the past to be able to deliver the standards that's required. The other issue is crisis situation, because as a lot of people are very keen to open tomorrow, and that's great, totally understandable. But what's going to happen if you've got a case yourself in your hotel? You'll have to guarantine the place for 2 weeks. You have got to do a whole range of new things that I don't think people have just realized what we're talking about here. And I think this is really, you really need to understand the economics of the new situation. The other thing is, you go out for breakfast. And quite often you've got a buffet breakfast. Are we going to allow people to go through the restaurant and use the same utensils to actually take all the food and go and cough on top of the food? So what's going to happen is that we're going to have a whole range of new practices to come in, especially until we've got the vaccine going on. And I think the industry will need to start preparing for that new level and new operating procedures to be able to work with the new conditions. I think we really need to look into Hong Kong, Taiwan, Singapore, and China, because those places, they had to deal with SARS in the past. And they've got a much better understanding of the level of detail and the operating procedures that they are required. And I'll mention Hotel Icon in Hong Kong as well, because if you go on their website, it gives you about 2 or 3 pages of what actually they're doing to make sure that you feel comfortable to be able to go back there.
Okay, Dimitrios. Any other ideas on this issue? No. So we were up to 220 audience now. It is.
There are a lot of questions of the.
Yes, please, Andreas.
Yeah, no, I think I agree with you. It's going to introduce new measures, new ways of working, but it's necessary, because if not, we don't have demand. No. The main question is how to use this to continue progressing in the industry. No, this is a crisis. This is an opportunity for some things. We have to explore that. I think we have a lot of questions on the audience. No.
Well, I can't see any more. Let me check.
Yeah, on the chat.
Yeah, there are lots of questions on the chat.
Yes, I could read.
Maybe a good idea to go through.
Okay, you can read, yes. One
so, Jaime, do you want to put your question? Okay. It's better like that, okay?
Okay. Hello, everyone. Be healthy. I put 2 questions. One, in the point of view of the residents' perceptions, and other one in the point of view of the micro and small business companies versus to the big chain companies in tourism. I will put the first one, which is concerning the attitudes, the perception of residents towards the tourists. And let's see an example. A small village in the countryside of Portugal, which has 100 inhabitants, and it has a lot of potential in the heritage, which is a very well-known heritage site by UNESCO. And suddenly, in the next year, we'll have 100, 500 Chinese tourists. What will be the attitudes of these residents towards after all of this pandemic? This is a very interesting issue to explore in the social relations, in the social perception of the small communities towards tourism. And this is the first reflection or a first question that I want to put to the panel. Thank you.
Yeah.
If I can try to answer this, yes. I think there are several issues here. One issue is, do the local residents in that small village like to have tourists? Yes, they like to have tourism so they can have the income coming in, but they don't want the germs and the virus to come in. And especially it depends where that small village is and what is the health facility that they've got nearby. Where is the nearest hospital, and is the nearest hospital good enough? And imagine that in that little village, a couple of tourists coming along and they're asymptomatic, they haven't got an idea that, that they've got a problem, and all of a sudden they are spreading virus around on that village. And 2 weeks later, 6 villagers die. This is the situation that happened in Spain, and this is the situation that has happened in Italy and many other places. I think what we find now, a lot of villages are saying to people, please do not visit us. It happened in the south of Italy. Do not come to my village from the north. It happened on the Greek islands. Do not come to my island right now, because if you bring the virus, and it has happened in Ikaria and Mykonos and some other places, our local facilities cannot actually support you and us. So short term, it's quite difficult. Now, you also mentioned Chinese tourists. I think Chinese tourists, they'll face discrimination on the short term, and we've got some evidence around the world on that. But I would be more concerned about places that they haven't taken measures, like the Americans or the Swedish people, because it will be more likely that they'll be carrying the virus without knowing. So I think we'll have discrimination, but we really, it will be really, really difficult because they're conflicting trends.
Okay, so any other comments?
We are introducing some kinds of social resilience, no? What collectives inside the society are more eager to take the virus? Do we really need the tourism? Yeah, this is kind of social issues coming back to the stage, no? Because in the very short term, you cannot allow people to come to your small town, but you cannot do it forever. So it's a social implication, very important there, no? Yeah, this is a challenge again. Yeah, of course, medical situation, the vaccine and all of this is going to improve, but we have some kind of virus every year, no? Why is not changing this virus? And so we have to live with him, with it. So how to do it? No, this was the question. Yeah, what do you think, the audience? Can you contribute a bit?
Yeah, probably I also have a few words. Yeah.
Yes, Haya.
Okay, so I think this is a good question. I think the attitude of residents will change. Actually, has already changed during the pandemic period, and also in the future once the pandemic is finished. The residents, especially local residents, their attitude to tourism will be different from their attitude in the past. But this actually is also a cost-benefit issue for certain destinations, not necessarily a small village, but tourism destinations which relies heavily on tourism. And they will need tourism. And although they probably will have a negative attitude towards tourism from certain regions and countries, but they will have to balance this out in the long run in terms of if they want to rely on tourism in their economy, and they have to be very receptive. But of course, tourism will have their own responsibilities, and they will probably more interactive or more, integrated into the local communities in terms of contributing to the local community, not only economically, but also bring cultural aspect to communicate with local communities so that both local communities and tourists will benefit. I think, yes, there will be some resistance, but in the long run, you know, both tourists and also residents will have to change their attitude or the way of doing things so that they can be both benefited from their experience. So that's, I think that's the way to go. Otherwise, you know, it's not good for the industry. It's not good for the local economy.
Okay. Any more?
Yeah, I was wondering about the first intervention of Antonia, no? Talking about going homes instead of big hotels, no? I think it's going to change, at least in the very beginning, this kind of location, no? What kind of tools do we have? Who can ensure me that there's not a problem here in this lodging, no, accommodation? So spreading the tourists around the bigger part of the society, not only some clustering places for mass tourism. No, I think it's opportunities being open.
Yeah, I think we used to be talking about the negative consequences of over-tourism until early this year. So now we're talking about how people may react or resist towards, you know, a normal type of tourism. I think we are now talking about if the local people are happy to accept or welcome, you know, even less number of tourists because of the risk. So I don't want to say this is a kind of under tourism or, you know, slow, but this is the type of tourism that we know before we introduce over tourism. But even we don't know how people, the local people may react, you know, to the, you know, to the normal situation of tourism, you know, tourists, you know, coming to any desk, even, you know, for Airbnb, so they will also go out for shopping and, you know, for dining. So it is going to be a normal type of, you know, form of tourism. Yes, I think Sibyl says, I agree with Dimitrios about something and so on. So she says, or he says, I think we have to be more creative in creating alternative safe to tourism, she says. Okay, so this is what we already, you know, discussed. So my last question is about, okay, the title was, you know, reinventing tourism. So many people now, you know, asking, even our students are asking, or the industry people are asking us the questions about the, you know, the meaning of, or the type of tourism that we can, you know, experience in the short term or in the, you know, medium or long term. So let's talk about, you know, the short term. So what kind of, you know, reinventions can be, you know, possible in tourism? So what kind, my question can be not, well, we already talk about the practices, you know, that can introduce in hotels, in tourism and so on. But what kind of tourism? So you said, okay, over tourism, no tourism. So perhaps there is a tourism, okay. So what kind of tourism can be more, let's say, attractive than the other forms of tourism? So
I like to be pragmatic. I think short term, any tourist who brings money will be more than welcome, especially in those places that they are desperate, so absolutely desperate for income.
It's a good start. So what about the future of mass tourism, for example?
Sorry, let me go briefly, Hayen, and then you come along. I think a lot of people are saying coronavirus and the crisis as the mother of the total redesign and re-engineering. I think I think there are huge implications, and we'll need to redesign and re-engineer tourism in general. But I think immediately the first thing that a lot of people will have to do is to bring us to some kind of economic activity back to where it's needed. And I think longer term, we really need to discuss the developments. This crisis is like a war, but in a war situation, what you normally have is the infrastructure and the superstructure is destroyed. Here, all the hotels will be there, all the airplanes will be there, and somehow we'll need to restart and reignite what we have. Longer term, I think with the Horizon 2030, we need to redesign what we're doing, but I think this is longer term.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah, actually, for the short term, immediate term, my view is domestic tourism, right? So
Yes.
I don't think any country will open up very soon. So I think the destinations should start with the domestic tourism first, and also for cities or you know, tourism depending cities. They probably also should start with even local sightseeing, leisure tourism by their residents. You know, just traveling out, venture out when the situation is getting better. Started with leisure tourism within city boundaries. I think domestic tourism should start first, and then gradually, when the situation is getting better, and international tourism will return. But in my view, even in the medium long term, the tourism industry will not change significantly. You know, we know actually humankind actually has a very short memory, right? We'll forget things very quickly. I think the behavior, consumer behavior, tourist behavior will return once the coronavirus pandemic is finished. But of course, given this experience and lessons, the industry and also as academics, we should think long term in terms of what kind of tourism we are going to develop in the long run, especially in the future. This type of pandemic will occur from time to time, and the industry should be well prepared to handle this type of situation, so we'll not have a big panic like what happened this time. Yeah, I think, you know, short term, we start with simple domestic tourism, and then gradually lead up to the normal tourism in the medium to long run.
Okay.
I think Hagen is absolutely right. The only problem is when you've got countries where domestic tourism is very brief and very short and very small in size. So China, of course, will have domestic tourism. US will have domestic tourism. Spain will have domestic tourism. The minute you start going to smaller countries where they've got smaller markets and don't forget that a lot of people would have lost their job, or they wouldn't have been able to work for 3, 4, 5 months. Yeah. Because you know, all the different trades are not operating. And I think the smaller countries will suffer much more than the bigger countries. Hayen is absolutely right with the domestic tourism, but for the large countries, not for the small countries.
Well, for Hong Kong, for example, right? So taking Hong Kong as example, it is a city, and there's no domestic tourism per se, you know. So I think, but when the border of Hong Kong is closed, and there's hundreds of restaurants, leisure facilities, attractions will be idle. So how can we keep this business going? Then we should encourage local residents to venture out.
Yeah, and I think
tourist attraction.
Yeah, there is an endogenous issues, no? Because what happens if the economic situation is getting worse and worse? How about domestic tourism? No, yeah. It will depend on the impact, economic impact of the COVID. So,
yes, Antonia.
Yes, I think that for now in Portugal we will have domestic tourism and some from Spain. I think Spain also will have some Portuguese tourists around because we could cross the bridge by car and is not far away. But I don't think tourism will be revamped this year, only next year, and even in a very special, I suppose that till now we were very focused on demand side. That is, we were trying to attract more and more tourists for the destinations that we have. Now we need to switch, to switch off and start to discover more destinations, more places where we could put all the 1.5 billion tourists that want to go out, okay? Mm-hmm. We should avoid overcrowded tourism. So the only thing that we need to do now is to start to discover new places where we could put 1.5 billion international tourists and respect for the earth, okay? Natural tourism, ethics of care, quietness, more places. We need to start to work on the supply side now. Okay?
Well, there
we already have the tourists. The only thing that we need to have now is more places to spread the tourists.
So, from our audience, Elizabeth say as well, I think even for domestic tourism, we need in bigger countries like US, China, Australia, we need airlines and airports. So we all mention about, domestic tourism and traveling by car, but this is the case only for perhaps Europe. Okay, but yes. What about countries, So this is a problem. In terms of, I don't know, perhaps because of the cost, not because of safety regulations. I think because of the cost, it might be more expensive traveling by airlines. And Kader from Turkey, she says, is a good, I think, a comment. She says people will be working at home, so it's a kind of home office. But people will have more free time for leisure activities. So I think the question can be like something like, if can we combine, leisure, tourism, holiday, and work at the same time. So I can go to Bahamas, for example, or Dimitrios go there, and then do some work over there, distance learning or editing the journal. So it's possible. So we don't have to, just stay in a certain place. So do you think if this can, stimulate tourism or travel activities more in the future?
Allocation of time, no?
Yes.
Nomadic working.
Of places.
Yes.
The thing is, we are all, a lot of people who are thinking about these things are intellectual workers who we can work effectively from anywhere with our computer and our brain. But the vast majority of the people are not like that. The vast majority of the people, they are bakers and they go to the bakery to produce bread, and they go to the hairdressers to actually cut hair, and they're going with their tools to fix electrical things. So a lot of people actually require physical presence, and we're a little bit out of the norm, and this will be much more complicated because we can effectively work from anywhere, but a lot of people cannot.
Yeah, but they think that is going to be changing, because if you need to cut your hair, you have to look for customers. If anybody is coming to your place, so this is one of the lessons of COVID. Why can't we make weightless economy?
So, okay. But when you need equipment, it's when you don't need brain, and when you need equipment to actually produce something. Yeah, but it will be really, really difficult. I mean, I guess there'll be people who will be coming to fix your car in your house. But when they need equipment to actually do something, you have got to go to them.
Of course, but something will be changing. Something will be changing, because this has been some kind of warning for many people working on the bakery. So perhaps this is not sustainable for you or your life. So you go thinking on that. And don't say about the hotels. How about?
There's a question is interesting from the audience. I think this probably is to Demetrius from Tago. He's asking, do you believe Trump favoritism towards England and Asia will affect the European market share?
I think we'll find politics and diplomacy coming into play, and I think there's already a blame game that is being going on for the time being. And I think gradually, you know, the Italians, for example, they don't like the Germans right now because the Germans did not provide the help at the time that was required. I think the coronavirus would generate some key political and diplomatic issues, and some of the issues in bilateral agreements and relations between countries. And I think this will also be at the back of Brexit, the back of a European budget that cannot be agreed. There's a lot of issues that they are going in parallel right now. And I think we'll go to a new stage of international politics.
Okay, so it is, well, in my time, it is 4:30, so we're just, you know, completing 1.5 hours. I think this is enough for today. And we don't have any questions. Well, do you want to say something, you know, as a final word? That's okay. We can, you know, just.
I just want to say that everybody that is in this business need to think what they can do for the community, what tourism does for the community rather than what community does for tourism. And I think every single one of us who is listening to this webinar and everybody who has got an influence on their friends, their kids, their students, their relatives, they need to find a little act of kindness to do, particularly in this time.
Yeah.
You know,
Yes.
one of my favorite places is a restaurant in Rhodes in Greece that's called Tomarouli, the lettuce. That I don't know them, I've never been there, but they just producing 200 meals per day, and they leave it outside on a table, and they say to all of those people who I need, come along and take some food if you need it.
Yeah.
And the word went around, and then other people who are kind, they go and donate food to them or ingredients so they can cook, so they can provide more food for everybody else. I think it's not what tourism is doing for us, but what do we do, each one of us, what do we do for community, the global community? First, immediately nearby us, our neighbors, but also the global community. And what can we at this stage do to support? My hero is Captain Tom, that he started walking around his garden. And he said, I'm going to do 100 laps on my garden to generate 1,000 pounds. He ended up generating 27 million pounds for the NHS. So what is the little, incredible. For those of you who have been following me, I've been going down the route of donating blood. Ask your students to go and donate blood. Blood is required at this stage. Do a little kind of accident of kindness and a little act of kindness, and just stay strong and stay safe. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Actually, the coronavirus actually brings out the humanity of many people, but also bring out the ugliness of some people. So as a tourism professions, actually, we should be the former instead of the latter, to help not only the community and also the industry and also fellow academics. I think we should be, you know, stand together to be solidarity in fighting against this virus.
Yeah, I agree with all of you. Thank you for.
Well, there is a question from Sibyl. She says, you know, because of the lockdown, how can students or people can go and donate the blood to, you know, well, but there are some specific, I think, you know, regulations. People can go out.
No, it's donation of blood is allowed and it's actually encouraged. I'm very much in contact with the doctors that they were treating my mother, and they were absolutely desperate for blood. And this is one of the things that people can go out and do. And it's a very safe situation because normally these wards and where they're doing that is outside the hospital or nearby. So it's totally safe, Sibyl. Yes, please encourage your students to go. I can tell you more where to go and what to do.
Yeah, I think that, yeah.
We have here, sorry, Andres, we have here a very nice question that I would like to answer, if you don't mind, or ask you to answer.
Okay.
Good afternoon. If you could give an advice for all the students who finish their tourism hospitality bachelor's degree now, this year, what it will be? They are worried about not getting a job.
Yeah, I think it's everywhere the same, and I've been answering this question. I think the first thing to do, because they are tourism and hospitality students and they understand hospitality and they understand really giving, is to go volunteer for the time being. Either they need to get in touch with the local authorities and see how they can support. They can support the government and they can support local structures. Let's face it, the governments in most of the cases, they have supported them through education to make them develop their skills. And quite a lot of students, they know how to cook, they know how to serve, they know how to package things, they know how to do logistics, they've got a lot of skills. And I think it's a huge opportunity for them to showcase what they can do. And a lot of those things will be appreciated by community, and then they'll come back and have a job. A lot of people are in this situation right now, and everybody needs to get together.
Okay, well, I think to me they are still young, so they are early at their 20s, so they have many years to come to find a good job in the tourism industry. So we worried about it.
Yeah, I will say that they will find hope.
Yeah.
At the 20s. Yeah, and even this is a big proof of what we can do. No, people is asking a lot of things, so we can be a voice, no, for the future. So I think it's a very important role, no, now on. Yeah, thanking the audience for being here, so interested in the webinar, thanking the organizers, and thanking all of you. Okay.
Yeah. Any others? Aya?
Thank you very much for being with us. Ian, please, sorry.
No, I just say the same thing. Thank you for the organizer, Metin and Antonia, and also for all participants in this session. Keep safe.
Yeah, thank you, Dimitri.
Keep safe also, Ian.
Andreas and
next time we'll be with wine and cheese, okay? Portuguese wine and cheese.
Oh, yes.
Thank you so much for coming. Thank you for
Alentejo, please.
wonderful, and keep in touch.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much.
Okay. Bye. Thank you.